Take a moment and look at what you're wearing. What's the first thought that comes to your mind? Is it about the color, the design, a memory associated with it? The fabric, maybe? What's interesting is no matter what you're wearing, that piece of clothing has a huge history to it. The farmer who produced the raw material, the people who transported it, the weavers who weaved it, the designers who conceived it, the tailors who brought that design to life, all the middlemen and retailers who moved the shipments around. And now you are wearing the hard work of numerous people you've not even seen. Isn't that wonderful? A fabric has the power to not only project your personality, but also the history of a nation. Today, we're going to talk about one such fabric which has been a hero for many years, played a very important role in our freedom struggle, and has been a constant companion to people from all parts of India. Yes, it is the Khadi fabric. We're going to learn about the history, exciting stories, and fun facts about this unique fabric from even more unique person who has worked extensively with it. I'm honored to have the iconic fashion guru, Sri Prasad Bidappa, who has been a pioneer in the Indian fashion industry for the last 4 decades and more. He is not just a fashion consultant, but also a textile revivalist who has curated exciting shows bringing local weaves of India to the center stage. There is a huge list of accolades he has had in his long career, including the title as the most influential style entrepreneur in the year 1998. He was instrumental in conducting the Rajasthan Heritage Week, which set a benchmark in the revival of Khadi and the traditional textiles of India, for which he has become one of the most influential spokespersons. He is also an avid environmentalist and works with many citizen groups active in protecting the city of Bengaluru. Welcome, Prasad ji. It's my honor to have you on our show, Indic Echoes, today. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sharanya, for having me on your program.
It is our pleasure and our honor indeed. So, we're here to talk about a very special fabric, Khadi. And I know, like myself, there are so many out there who confuse Khadi for cotton and also use that interchangeably. So, can you set us the context? What is this fabric, Khadi?
Khadi is defined as a fabric which is, first of all, where the thread is spun on a charkha. Like you saw Mahatma Gandhi ji too, and he always encouraged Indians to use the charkha. That was to produce thread. And when that thread was produced, it's taken to a handloom and woven into a fabric. So when it is a handmade thread becoming a handmade fabric, it is a Khadi. So technically the entire world wore Khadi before the advent of all the power looms that came to us in the late 18th century from a British inventor. And once he invented the machine, then Khadi became something where you took machine-made thread and wove it on a machine, so that lost the quality that Khadi possessed. Khadi, because it was handmade, has a very beautiful natural texture. Khadi can be made out of cotton, out of wool, out of silk, because these are all natural fibers. You can also make it out of many of the new things that have come out, like pineapple fiber, banana fiber. Many of the other vegetable fibers that have come can be made into Khadi. So Khadi is basically a handmade product. And today, India is the last country in the world to have such a wealth of Khadi, because Khadi being handmade to me is truly a luxury product. And I think that instead of running behind designer bags and designer clothes that are machine made and produced in factories in vast quantities, you have to look at the textile traditions of India. On one side, we have the beautiful Khadis, which are hand spun and hand woven. And then we have the handloom textiles, where the thread could have been manufactured on a machine, but it is made into a textile on the handloom. All of India's great saris are like that. They are not khadi, they are handloom. So this is the difference between khadi and handloom.
Oh, wow.
Khadi being spun, hand spun in cotton or silk or wool, and then woven on a handloom. And handlooms, which can use machine-made thread, but it has to be produced on a handloom to make the beautiful saris of India. Many of you may have heard of names like Kanjivaram and Benares and Pochampalli and Patola, the Kasavu from Kerala, the Bethany from Maharashtra, the Sambalpur from Odisha, the beautiful Jamdanis of Bengal. These are all handloom saris, but the thread is made on a machine because the women of India love their saris to be very fine. And Khadi, because it is hand spun, is a rougher fabric. So of course you can find saris made out of Khadi, which many great Indian women have worn. Even Indira Gandhi used to wear saris made of Khadi. In fact, one of her wedding presents was when Mahatma Gandhi ji gave her a Khadi sari that he had very treasured piece in Mrs. Gandhi's collection, and I think it is in the National Museum today. So this is the difference, and what we get in India is the largest variety of handloom, the largest variety of khadi. We just have things that are so beautiful to express how beautiful they can be. So that is the definition of khadi, Sharanya.
This is so fantastic. Actually, it started on such a high note because, honestly, I did not know this distinction. As much as I read about it, I was not able to kind of explain to my own self the difference. So thank you so much for putting it and also telling us why it is so special. Now, how old is this fabric? You mentioned about, the whole world wearing this prior to the invention in the 18th century. But in India, especially if we go back to the history, usually when we talk about kings and queens and fine fabrics, we talk about silk, not so much about, the technique, as you mentioned it. So can you tell us a little more about how old it is? What are some of the texts that talk about it? And is it true that India was probably the first ones to do this?
I think so, because you see, India is a very ancient civilization, and we were very civilized long before the Europeans were or before any of the other countries were. So in fact, I think I can safely say that India is a civilization that goes back at least 50 centuries, if not more. And therefore, we evolved at a faster rate, and many of our techniques evolved at a faster rate. I think we were weaving clothes almost 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Maybe it was in a very rough way, but in 3,000 years ago, we were making very beautiful fabrics. And in Mohenjo-daro, which is of course now in Pakistan, they have found examples of beautiful textiles with ajrak block printing. So that's a 3,000-year-old discovery. So you can imagine how old the Indian tradition is and how beautiful it is that we have such gorgeous textiles and embroideries and woven patterns and block printing, all kinds of things, tie and dye. India is a very, very evolved country. We have to be very proud of who we are and what we were, what we are, and what we are going to be. Because I genuinely feel that India is going to be one of the most powerful countries in the world, and we deserve to be, because for too many years we were ruled by foreign invaders. For too many years our civilization was subject to, violence and war and things like that. And now we come to a time of peace, a time of evolution, a time of progress. And I think that the next generation of India, all you wonderful kids out there, are going to take India to unprecedented heights. I expect us to be the most respected and the most valued country in the world. And all that comes from having a civilization that's so old. So when you look at, for example, the old temples of India, from Hampi to Belur to Halebid to Ajanta and Ellora, to all these fantastic constructions which are thousands of years old, and you realize that our engineering, our sophistication in terms of technology has existed for a longer time than was previously thought. And I think that history needs to be corrected a lot, and history needs to establish the fact that Indians were technologically very, very sophisticated in terms of everything from engineering to architecture to literature, dance, music. We've done it all, and we've done it first. So, like that, I would say that Khadi would be, in my opinion, I think about 5,000 years ago, when we first stopped wearing animal skin and started wearing, fibrous plants. And then it evolved until we started weaving. And the early weaving must have been very elementary, but it got better and better, got more and more sophisticated, until today the handloom is one of the most sophisticated instruments you've ever seen. They say that all the wiring for the modern computer was inspired by the warp and weft of the handloom. And the way the wiring was done it actually was inspired and takes all its ideas from the way the handloom takes its thread and puts it together for the warp and the weft. So it's a very interesting concept to know that India is such an old civilization, that we were most probably the very first ones to be doing a lot of things. And over 2,000 years ago, India was exporting silk, exporting cotton, exporting muslin, all these wonderful things to every corner of the globe. When you see movies like, that's set in ancient Greece or ancient Rome, you will find a lot of the women over there wearing beautiful scarves and stoles made out of Indian silk. So I think that India's tradition of export itself is a couple of thousand years old, almost before biblical times. So be very proud of India and be very proud of what we have achieved, and be very proud of what we are going to achieve also.
I'm sure. So all children watching out our videos, and especially this interview, there's a lot of hope, and it's our responsibility to do whatever Prasad ji just mentioned. So what is unique about Khadi, I personally think, is, as you mentioned, every state has its own, type of handloom, and even the designs, like you said, the block print and what have you there. But when we say Khadi, it's kind of everywhere in the country, despite the fact that we have extreme climatic conditions in the south and north. So what makes this particular fabric very kind of adaptable to the climate?
Let me just show you an example of Khadi. Khadi is basically an extremely comfortable fabric to wear, because first of all, it is usually made with natural fibers like cotton, like wool. This is woolen Khadi. Can you see it clearly, Sharanya?
Yes, I can.
These are all woolen Khadis. This is the beautiful Kota Doria fabric from Rajasthan. These are the woolen Khadis that come to us also from Rajasthan. I mean, Khadi is an absolutely amazing fabric. It is something that is eco-friendly. It is something that is biodegradable. So you know that if you bury a piece of Khadi in the earth, it will disassemble very quickly. It will break down very quickly, unlike synthetic fabrics that are made out of petrochemicals and horrible things like nylon and polyester, which I just hate completely, because they are just such ugly fabrics, and they, I think, make the person wearing it, they make them smell very bad also, But whereas Khadi is something that will absorb your sweat and wick it out into the atmosphere. So these are fabrics that are actually very healthy to wear. They say that a baby wrapped in Khadi will sleep much better. But look at us, we import our babies' bedding and blankets and sheets from Mother Care and Mother Choice, and places like that, all made of the purest fake polyester and nylon. Somewhere along the way, we lost the ability to appreciate the good things about India and ourselves. We began to ape the West too much, to copy the West too much, and we still do it. Well, there's nothing wrong in it. Civilization is like that. We take the best of every civilization and we borrow it and we make different things happen with it. But in this particular case, I think we have to go back to our roots to understand that Khadi is a fabric that really typifies India. It is something that is a very, very beautiful fabric which you can wear with a great deal of pride and a great deal of, style, really. Because today, when I see a woman dressed in a beautiful handloom sari, I feel that no designer garment can come close to the beauty of a Kanjivaram sari or a beautiful bridal Benares. Like even Deepika Padukone wore a wonderful Benares sari for her wedding. And I've really admired her for doing that because I thought that she would inspire a lot of young Indian women to go back to the sari. And
Absolutely.
these are the things I think that are very, very important. And we've got to understand also that the Indian system of dressing was all based on drapes. We drape the sari. We have over 90 varieties of draping a sari. Every corner of India has got a different style. Though the most common style is the Mysore style, which is what we call the ulta pala, which is worn over your left shoulder, which most girls tend to wear. Then the Gujarati sari and the Kurk sari are what are called the Sida Palla because it comes in front and it comes over your right or left shoulder or again over your left shoulder. So, the kind of styles we have, the dhoti is something that is draped. We have the lungi, we have the mekla chador from Assam, which is 2 pieces of fabric that are draped to look like the sari. We have myriad varieties and beautiful varieties of these gorgeous textiles being shown in so many different ways. And when you see my fashion shows also, you will be able to see the kind of work that we do. We introduce the top designers of the country to the textile artisans so that they're able to produce some new ideas, come up with new color combinations. And this teaches the designer a lot about traditional textiles, and the designers in turn teach the artisans about contemporary design, what colors are fashionable now, how to use a color forecast to do different kinds of color combinations instead of sticking to the same old varieties. So this is what we try to do all the time. We try to take the existing beautiful artisanal arts of India and we try to modernize it in projects that we call, it's really a beautiful kind of a concept where it's an intervention without interference. We don't want to change the original thinking of the artisans. We don't want to interfere with the beautiful old ways of doing things, but we would like to modernize it to make it more appealing to younger Indian audiences and thereby to global audiences. Because when the West discover Khadi and handloom, they are going to take it over. That's why I keep telling Indian designers, don't wait for them to come and discover it first like you've done with everything else. Here is something that you can discover for yourself very, very quickly. And you must take the textiles of India, the techniques of India, and you have to create a global product with this.
That's a very beautiful advice. And I think it not just applies for the textile industry, quite applies to everything else as well. Like, when we talk about art forms or anything else or jewelry making, I think India's creativity is shown, very, very vividly, especially like you mentioned about the 90 different types of drapes. We have different types of art forms, different types of jewelry, different types of fabric, different types of doing, the designs for the fabric in every state. And I think this is such a wonderful thing. And I I personally think one lifetime is just not enough to learn about the diversity of India itself. So, going back to the fabric and its role in the freedom struggle, I know you've also extensively researched about this, and I know you also have many interesting anecdotes of how this fabric played a huge role in our freedom struggle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. With pleasure, because I always like to remind people about Mahatma Gandhi. I think he was one of the greatest Indians who ever lived. And it's because of him that we are walking today as free people with our heads held high. We don't answer or call anybody our superior or sir anymore. It's India first. And I think he helped us discover our identity. He helped us get our freedom. So it happened in a kind of a way where he rediscovered the charkha, because you see, working on the charkha and spinning is a very spiritual and contemplative exercise. You have to concentrate, and you almost, they say, achieve nirvana when you're spinning, because your concentration is so high and so keen to ensure that the thread never breaks, because if the thread breaks, your concentration breaks. So the whole point of spinning on the charkha is to do this endless thread that never breaks. Of course, it will break sometimes, and then you join it together again. And that's what gives Khadi the rougher texture of it. But Gandhiji very famously said that if you put a charkha in every home in India, there will be no poverty. But did we listen? No, unfortunately not. And today it's become fashionable to bash Gandhiji and say rude things about him, and I feel very sad to hear that, because he was a human being, and maybe he had a few faults here and there, but that's not really important. It's what he did for us that is so important. It's what he achieved for us. So what he did was, he realized that the British had managed to destroy the handloom industry of India because they wanted to sell their own machine-made fabrics back to us. So what they would do is that they would export a lot of wool and silk and cotton from India. They would weave it on man-made machines in Britain, and then they would send the fabric back and sell it to us and make us pay a heavy tax on it, because you do know that Britain stole trillions of dollars, of pounds worth of goods and treasures from India in the 200 years that they were over here. And this was one of the worst things they did, because they broke our handlooms, they discouraged our weavers, they ensured that the weavers would become day laborers and not weave. But you know what saved the day besides Mahatma Gandhi's message was the Indian women, because Indian women never stopped wearing the sari. So the demand for handloom and khadi saris was always there. And while our fathers and grandfathers were very happy to wear suits, if you look at pictures of our ancestors, the men are always wearing, lal topis and three-piece suits and woolen worsted kind of suits and all kinds of things. But our women are always in beautiful saris, beautiful handlooms, beautiful khadi, and that's what saved the day. So when Gandhiji decided that the freedom struggle would begin by breaking the British back in terms of their business and exports, and he exhorted Indians to stop buying British fabric. And when we stopped buying British fabric, that source of revenue dried up, and the British were not able to have that kind of resources or the kind of money that they had access to while this was a successful business for them. And then he told us, burn British fabrics. And we made huge bonfires of everything and burnt all those woolen and cotton and all the other machine-made fabrics that the British were sending here. And more people started wearing saris and dhotis and angavastrams and loincloths and whatever you have it, but all made from Indian textiles like handloom and khadi. And that was what created the first big slap in the face of the British when it came to Indians achieving their own independence. And that's why we call it the fabric of freedom, because Gandhiji used it as a metaphor for a non-violent struggle that did not kill anyone, did not shoot anyone, did not destroy a civilization, but in a peaceful manner showed us that we could win the war through peaceful means. So ahimsa was something that we learned from Gandhiji, and I hope it is a lesson we never forget, because I would never like to see India go to war again. I even don't like watching India fighting on the Pakistan front and the Kashmir front and the Chinese front, and to see our soldiers dying, because I think that we are living in an age of civilization which is advanced. We should all know better than that. Our leaders should know that war is not the answer. And I think that the next generation especially will really, put an end to armaments and war and fighting with your neighbors. And we will all learn to coexist peacefully. And Khadi will be the metaphor for that also.
Can you tell us a little more about the diversity in terms of the textiles and the weaves, the designs, and the patterns?
Khadi is fairly common all around the country, and it's very difficult to say.
Can you tell us a little more about the designs and the rich colors that we use, which I think is very, very unique to India?
Well, our embroidery forms are very complex and beautiful. You'd be surprised to know.
To all the children watching this, I would definitely strongly urge you, just like Prasad ji just did, go learn about what is your local handloom, what's your local design.
In our days, studying at NID, like we had days of research in the library to put a project together.